So the Civil War is over, but the fight for the soul of the American South, that was just getting started. You've got 4 million people who are newly freed, and the biggest question on everyone's mind was monumental. Who's going to control their labor? We're about to dive into this brutal, transformative period we call Reconstruction, and we're going to use North Carolina as our window into this nationwide struggle for power.
All right, so here's how our story is going to unfold. We'll look at it in 5 acts. We're starting with the South completely in ruins. Then we'll see the incredible rise of Black political power, get into the fierce battle for control, uncover the campaign of terror that tried to crush it all, and finally, see what new order rose up from the ashes.
So let's set the scene. I want you to picture North Carolina in 1865. The war didn't just damage it, it left it shattered. We're not just talking about buildings, we're talking about the entire economy, the entire social structure. It was a society right on the brink of total collapse.
And this was so much more than just rebuilding cities. Think about it. The very foundation of Southern society had just crumbled to dust. When slavery was abolished, every single relationship, how people worked, who held power, the whole social ladder, it was all up for grabs. It was this moment of incredible possibility, but also, you can imagine, just terrifying uncertainty.
And the economic devastation, it was just staggering. Farm values plummeted by 1/3, and get this, every single bank in the state went under. With so many men gone from the war, both Black and white communities were in a state of absolute crisis. This was the broken landscape where the future of the South was going to be fought over.
But right into this chaos stepped the newly freed Black population. And they were not just passive observers waiting to be told what to do. No way. Instead, they immediately and powerfully started to organize. They were demanding a voice in this new South they were literally helping to build from the ground up.
You know, the speed of this political mobilization was just astonishing. We're talking mere months after the war ended, and freedmen are already organizing. They're sending petitions, they're holding conventions. By 1867, they'd formed the Equal Rights League. It's just a testament to how sophisticated and determined they were to claim their place, led by these visionary figures like James H. Harris and James Walker Hood.
So what were they actually asking for? This is the crucial part. Look how moderate and forward-thinking their demands were. They weren't calling for revenge, they were calling for the basic building blocks of a modern, fair society: protection under the law, an end to discrimination, public education, and full citizenship rights. They were establishing themselves as serious players with a very clear vision for the future.
And this political awakening, well, it set the stage for the main event, the central conflict of the whole era, a duel for control. Control over the new Black electorate and, by extension, control over Black labor. But this wasn't some simple two-sided fight. It was way more complicated than that.
Okay, first, let's meet some of the key players. There's this one group called carpetbaggers, and that was definitely not a compliment. It was a term used by their opponents. These were Northerners who came south after the war. Sure, some were just opportunists, but a lot of them were actually driven by a real desire to rebuild the South and establish the Republican Party there.
This chart really breaks down the 2 major factions that were scrambling for the Black vote. On one side, you have the old planter class. They just wanted to keep their agricultural empire going. On the other, you had these northern capitalists who saw a huge opportunity for industrial growth. You know, railroads, factories. Both sides knew the Black vote was the key to power, but their visions for the South were worlds apart.
And the stakes in this economic battle were incredibly high. I mean, life and death high. This quote, it's from Republican legislators, and it's a chilling response to planners who were basically using starvation and homelessness as weapons to force Black laborers to vote their way. This shows you, this wasn't just some polite political debate. This was a desperate struggle for survival, and believe me, it was about to get a whole lot uglier.
As the old planter class started losing its grip on political power, the struggle took a really dark and violent turn. They basically unleashed a systematic campaign of terror. It was designed to do one thing: crush the Republican coalition and intimidate Black voters into submission.
Just let this number sink in for a moment. 40,000. The governor of North Carolina, William Holden, estimated there were 40,000 Ku Klux Klan members in his state alone. This wasn't some small group of extremists hiding in the shadows. This was a massive, clandestine army with a very clear political goal: to overthrow the Reconstruction government by force.
A congressional report from the time gives us just a chilling record of this campaign. And you can see, the violence wasn't random. It was a strategic, targeted effort to dismantle the Republican Party. They went after both black citizens and their white allies, all with the goal of restoring the old racial and political order.
And that quote from Governor Holden, wow, it just powerfully captures the result of all that violence. For huge numbers of people, nightfall brought pure terror. Men were literally abandoning their families and hiding in the woods at night just to survive. This wasn't just crime. It was a campaign that successfully blanketed entire regions in an atmosphere of fear.
And the brutal truth is, that campaign of terror worked. It absolutely succeeded in suppressing the vote and breaking the will of the Reconstruction government. And this led to the end of this brief radical experiment in democracy and the rise of a whole new system of control.
Now, all this violence was often justified by spreading this myth of Negro domination. But this chart, it just shows you the truth. Yeah, black representatives made historic gains in 1868, which is incredible, but they were still a clear minority. That whole propaganda line was a deliberate lie, a smokescreen to hide the real goal of the terror campaign.
And this really brings us to the core argument of our source material here. The backlash was a calculated power grab. Race was the weapon, the justification. But the real war was over economic and political control. It was a full-blown counter-revolution designed to reestablish a system of exploitation, not just over black labor, but over poor white labor too.
Which leaves us with a really difficult question at the end of all this. The end of the Civil War promised a new birth of freedom. But if legal slavery was just replaced by a new kind of economic and political subjugation, one enforced by terror, what did this whole era of Reconstruction truly accomplish? It's a question that really gets at the complex and often tragic legacy of America's attempt to rebuild itself from the ashes.